Well, hello and welcome to Talking Businessly. We don't have our normal intro of Daniel talking because we don't have Daniel with us. We
And
have
I'm not Daniel Colborn, and this is that call.
Dum Dum.
That was pretty close, right?
Yeah, it's pretty good, really good. I this was frantic. I'm like learning how to use Zencaster in real time because Daniel's usually the one who sets it up. So slightly confused by the UI, but we made it and we're recording.
I see waveforms at the bottom, so I think we're good. I heard the intro music, which is awesome. So I think we're off to the races.
Beautiful. I love it. Aaron, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you, John Rudolph Drexler?
I think I'm good. It's a slightly frantic week. I made this whole set behind me to just really emphasize how dramatic things are
Yeah,
over here.
what are you hiding back there? Are you
Yeah,
cooking
exactly.
something up? Because it is very prominent that you have boxes behind your
Yeah.
head.
Talking Businessly brought to you by Home Depot.
Yeah,
Um,
apparently. I hope you're getting paid for
yeah.
this.
I am. I started my move this morning,
Okay.
and am doing the main part of my move tomorrow. So moving to a new
Okay.
apartment.
Are we in new space or old space right now?
This
What
is
am I
old
looking at?
space. Yeah.
Okay.
So this is like now a barren shell of an apartment, with like no life in it. Everything's in
Yeah.
boxes. So I went over to the new place. It's great. I'm very, very excited about it. I think it's a lot more conducive to working at home. So I'm super excited. But also for the next like 48 hours, life is a little crazy, but
Yeah.
that's all right.
I mean, if you can get an entire move done in 48 hours and have life back to
Yeah.
normal, you're a machine. So,
Yeah. It's great. That's the
yeah.
hope. I had some real opportunities for some Marie Kondo.
Mm.
I purged a lot. I had a funny moment where like once I signed the new lease, I was like, I'm gonna start packing now, and anything I don't need in the next month, I will
Hmm.
pack. And it like immediately raised an interesting question, which is like, if I don't need this thing for an entire month, do I need this thing?
Yep.
So I got rid of quite a lot. It was great.
Good. Yeah, that's the move, is to like throw everything away before you move it, because
Yeah,
the temptation is to just I'll figure this out later and pack
yeah,
it all up and then move it, and you're like, I don't even want any of this stuff.
yeah. Exactly. Um, so yeah, things have been good. Things that did this is a week where Daniel is the reason he's not here is because he is in an Airbnb with friend of the show Chris Morell, and they are making a very cool event sourcing package. We'll talk a lot more about that on future episodes. But Daniel was basically like, I need to take a week where I am not like thinking about any company problems, and I can just make this thing. And I was like, you got it. And it's been pretty smooth without him. I've been working on some hard programming problems without him, and like not having the easy like just tuple Daniel,
Hmm.
has been good because it's made me like fight some demons by myself. But I think overall pretty good. How are you doing?
This is a good stress test of y'all's
Exactly.
OKR of like, I need to randomly be able to take 6 weeks off and nobody
Yeah.
worries about it. Like, well, hang on there, friendo.
Yeah, we had a whole dust up about it because Daniel really believed I didn't understand what he was saying, and I was being like, I was trying to like gently nudge him
Hmm.
towards like, this is not the stress test we need right now. Um, it's like, I agree, a stress test is in order. Also, like, this is the first like month of this company's
Yeah, we
existence.
started this business 8 minutes ago. I don't think we need to take a stress test right now.
Yeah,
Everything
exactly.
is a stress
Yeah,
test.
exactly. So it's good. I mean, him taking he the one of the problems we've had. It's not a problem, but just like one of the things that we need to reckon with is that he is a potential blocker on everything because he's
Yes.
like the lead developer. He has the relationship with our existing clients, and so for him to take a week off and for things to go fine is a pretty good omen so far.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Good. Well, do you want to do the format? What's the format? How
that
are
was
you?
great.
Feedback
Well,
for you, feedback for me?
yeah, you asked me how I was doing, and I that
Oh,
was
okay.
that was my answer.
Oh shoot. I thought you were doing niceties there at the beginning. I thought you're like, "Hey, how are
No,
you? How's your father?"
this is
No, that
great.
was the format.
No,
Man.
no, we're
Okay, I
good.
missed it.
But now you're gonna get your second chance because you only gave me pretty good. So
Okay.
you can tell me how you're doing for real now.
Okay, cool. Whew. This is the first time doing the format. How am I doing for real now? For real now, good. I feel very busy right now. Um, Work at Planet Scale, where I work, is good. We are ramping up video production at Planet Scale, and a lot of that comes down to me producing videos, which I enjoy doing, but is of course a lot of work. We're hiring a video editor, and so that will become less work in the future. So I feel good about that. Um, I feel stressed about the launch of screencasting.com, which is going to happen on Wednesday, the 20th. So, whenever you're listening, it has either already happened or about to happen. So, I feel stressed about that. Um, how else am I? Also, I am in physical pain. I've got like carpal tunnel
Oh no.
going on. So, I think that rounds out the how are you section.
Shoot. Has that been going on for a while?
Yeah, it's been going on for a couple weeks now. There was a time many years ago, a few years ago, where I got just like really bad arthritis pains everywhere, and it lasted for about 2 months, and then just totally went away. Like I went and
Huh.
saw a rheumatologist, and they were like, "Yeah, everything seems fine," and it just went away completely.
Interesting.
They suggested it could be some sort of viral thing. And around that same time, my two children had hand, foot, and mouth, and so it was like maybe there was a
Oh,
virus
interesting.
family, and my presentation of it was arthritis. And so I'm wondering if that's the same because like my fingers hurt, like my knees hurt, my wrists hurt. And so I'm hoping it's one of those things where it's like, you're the parent of small children who are sick, and for some reason you get arthritis when they get sick. But
Yeah.
yeah, not super fun.
Yeah. That's tough, man. Well, you have a lot a lot going on. I've been curious about like does Aaron Francis sleep? Uh
Yeah, not very much. So these days I was on a get up early, streak for a while, and that has now worked all its way all the way back around to stay up late. And so these days I finish work around 5:30 or 6 and then go do family dinner, kids bedtime, that sort of stuff, and then from about 7:30 to midnight I do other work.
like non-planet scale work.
Yep.
That's where you're
For like
streaming and video.
Yeah, that's where I'm recording my own videos or working on screencasting.com or, any of the other things.
It's a lot.
Boy, isn't it? Sure
Maximum
is.
effort.
Maximum effort. Yeah,
Ha-
exactly.
have you hit any walls? Like any like I can't get out of bed. Like I need
Super
to go
duper
sleep
have.
for 12 hours.
Yeah, big time. Yeah, I hit mini walls, MINI, not numerous, but rather small.
Mm-hmm.
I hit small walls. And I just kind of pull back when that happens, and I will sounds crazy, take a night off or take 2 nights off or whatever and just not do anything at all. And there have been projects that I've just kind of fully put on the back burner or dropped altogether. And so I feel like I work very much in ebbs and flows, and sometimes like right now I've got a ton of energy. Like I don't mind staying up late because all the stuff I'm working on I feel energetic for, but there have been times where it's been like I can't do a freaking thing besides
Yeah,
planet scale work, and I just have to like wait a little bit for it to come back.
sure. Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Man, um, there's something else. Yeah, the hand thing. I thought about that recently, like how precious my hands are. I was having this
Yeah.
thought because I was like, yeah, obviously, all of my work is I don't work with my hands like a coal miner, but like
Right.
I do work with my hands.
In a
Uh,
very delicate and precious way, yes, we
yeah,
work with our hands.
and then like my my main hobby outside of work is that I do Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, which would be
Hmm.
there is a guy at Jiu Jitsu who he's like a high schooler who only has one hand, and he it more power to him. It's an incredible thing to do, extremely difficult. And I was
Yeah.
thinking about like even writing or playing a video game or whatever. It's like,
Yeah.
boy, hands are scary.
Hands are scary. Yeah. So I've got the one wrist guard here and I've got the other wrist guard here for my mousing hand, trying to trying to put some support in place until it goes away.
Good. Well, take care of yourself.
So what's the next question? Any feedback for you? I guess these are going to be
Yeah.
harder since
Yeah.
we
Do you have any feedback for me?
this is
Well, I'm
our
gonna.
second time speaking.
I'll ask you for more directed feedback later on in the episode, so you can punt a little bit if you want.
Okay.
But um,
Do you have any feedback for Daniel? I guess is the real question since he's not here and
it's
he'll never
interesting.
hear this.
Do I have any feedback for Daniel? I don't have a ton right now. I appreciate like we're I can tell you the hard problem that we have right now, which is I will probably be just like the next episode with him is like we we're really dedicated to. I mean, especially just as an early company, but also just who we are. Like we're not going to turn in things that are halfway finished for people.
Right.
We want to deliver. That's like we're not screwing around on that. And one of our first big clients, we kind of got towards the end of the agreement, and we bid off kind of like an extra portion that turned out to be pretty hard. And
Ooh,
so like now, and we're not gonna give it back to them half finished. So
right.
like it was kind of it was our problem. It wasn't the client's problem, right? Um, but it led to this situation where this slightly kind of perfect storm where like I am now like hacking away at it, um,
Mm,
and these are like not profitable hours anymore.
yep.
Um, and Daniel's not here to help. And so like my week has been a little bit like, oh, this can happen
Yeah.
if you're not really smart about this. So it wasn't like some terrible mistake. We're not like losing money on it. The client's going to get what they want. Everything's going to be fine. But it was sort of like my first reality check of like, oh, okay. So like this is what happens if you don't plan super carefully. And I'm sure it'll happen even if you do plan super carefully. So I'm kind of like reckoning with that right now. That's what's hottest on my mind right now.
So what is I this is not a world that I am in. So listening to y'all's call is always really interesting for me. And now I get to ask questions back. So it's even
Yeah,
better. So what is like the situation where the client comes back and like let's call it an addendum, scope creep might be another way to say it, but they have
yeah,
this addendum. What do y'all I guess what did you do and what will you do in the future to decide like, oh, okay, we can add this to the project or we
yeah.
can't?
It's a good question. So part of this inevitably comes back to this conversation that Daniel and I have had a lot off the podcast. And I think we're going to
Mm-hmm.
eventually have on the podcast. It's like there's there's a lot of ways to price things, but like the two most obvious paths are like you hire us hourly
Mm-hmm.
and you get what you get. And so if somebody says we want you to do an extra thing, we say okay, that we think that might take an extra 4 or 6 weeks. Just keep us on,
Mm-hmm.
pay us for more hours. It's pretty straightforward. Um, the other path is pricing out just the value of a project.
Right.
And that the thing that everyone in the agency world says is that the latter of those two is where you really can get margin.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you work really fast, then you can say, um, here's what this project is worth to you, the client. We believe that we can get that done in a reasonable number of hours, which means that there's a lot of profit to be made here. Um, and so in each of those cases, I think if in the first one is like if somebody said we want you to do an extra thing, we'll just say it'll take longer, so you're going to pay us for more hours.
Mm-hmm.
And the latter, um, we should really kind of say this should be priced as a separate project in some ways, or like we might need to revisit the original contract to account for scope creep here. In this case, it was like they had hired us for a fixed number of hours, and
Mm,
we basically 2 months ago thought, okay, we're kind of done with the main thing. What's the next thing we can do because we have more hours to spend here? And we bid off a thing that was a little bit too big. Um,
I see.
and so then we like did it. We finished our hours, and we're like, this thing is not done. We're gonna finish it.
Bummer.
Yeah. So that's basically the risk is like pricing out projects is like if you successfully move fast, um, there's good profit, and the problem is projects are very difficult to estimate. And so, yeah,
Yeah, it seems like the value-based pricing or whatever is great if you get it right, but you could go
yeah,
pretty upside down pretty
yeah.
quickly if you get it
Whereas
wrong.
if we're just charging hourly, it's like it is what it is.
Right.
We'll keep going until it's done and we get paid either way. So it's kind of like lower margin, less risk for hourly, higher margin, higher risk for value based.
Right.
Yeah.
Oof. That does not sound easy. So
Yeah.
good
It's
luck to
fun.
you all.
It's a, I'm enjoying just the like experimentation of it and like
Yeah.
just learning as we go. And there's a lot of wise people, especially in the Laravel world, like there's great agencies and we're friendly
Yeah.
with them. And like, I'm interested to hear how other people do this. Some people say like, oh, only ever do value based. Oh, only ever.
Mm-hmm.
So, um, it's interesting. I've heard other people, not in the web development as much, but I've heard other people who run agencies and like marketing and branding and things like that. They're basically like they charge a pretty like low margin hourly thing. That's basically like we're passing the cost of labor onto you, but then there's like a 20,000 fee that's just like for working with us. Like basically like if
Oh,
you're gonna have our attention for the next 4 months, that's gonna cost you $20,000. Now, all of the labor that goes into it, we'll just charge you basically what it
that's
costs us.
interesting.
Yeah, it's like there's a lot of interesting ways of approaching it, but we gotta keep on tinkering with it. So
Interesting. Okay, cool. I like that. Well, good feedback for Daniel. Daniel,
yeah,
listen up. We'll talk
yeah.
about that next episode.
My feedback for you, Aaron, is that well, we were all very impressed with you, and we really appreciate that. Well, we'll get into more of this in a minute of like what the presence that you have established online is like very good and positive. And in my like personal dealings with you, I'm like very happy that it's like it's not a front. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
we had some like really specific questions for you about like, hey, how do we do better at Twitter and like get our stuff out there? And you were like jumped into our Slack and we're just like super helpful and constructive and detailed and specific. And it was like, okay, like he is doing what he says that he does, and I really appreciate that.
That is encouraging to hear. So thank you for saying that. I am glad that that is your read on it, because it would be a disaster if I had this public for acting
Yeah,
privately. I was something else.
yeah,
I don't think I would be able to pull it off, because I am like pretty transparent and pretty emotionally vulnerable, and I would feel like this is all going to crash and I'm going to be in shambles. But
yeah,
yeah, that is good to hear that that is your perception as well.
yeah. Do you have any feedback for me or Thunk or anything else before I ask you for some more like specific feedback on things?
First piece of feedback is I like your new camera angle.
Thank you.
I know that you're moving out of this like today, but you're
Yeah.
looking right at me. That's
Okay,
great.
good.
Love that.
Noted for my next
No,
setup.
I don't think so. I've noticed, and we've talked about some of the different things you're trying on Twitter, and I'm here for it. I'm here for the experimentation. I think iterating until you find what works for the people you're trying to reach, and also what works for the ever changing Twitter algorithm
Yeah,
is good. And you've been quick to try new things, which I think means you'll find it.
cool. Great. Um, yeah, it gets into like one of the things I was going to ask about. So last time we did the podcast, we were talking about mentors and empaneling people, and
Empaneling
you were
people.
the first person we were like, we want Aaron on the panel, and so we're very excited to have you helping with this because this is something that Daniel and I are just like not particularly good at,
Mm-hmm.
and we've realized like I think part of our goal or part of our strategy is to be just like super transparent about what we're doing. I think when people do, I don't know, content marketing and stuff, and it's like not, it's if they're trying to pretend it's one thing when it's another, it feels a little gross and weird. So we've tried to
Yes.
be really just like, look, like we're trying to put out really helpful content to people because we want them to come to us. Ultimately, we want to get clients out of that. Many of the people who see our content will not become clients, and that's great. That's no problem at all. But like, we're trying to put a lot of really helpful stuff out there because trying to express that that's what kind of the brand of the company is, and we eventually want to generate clients out of that.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's we've tried to just be like really upfront about that and joke on here about like if you're listening to the podcast you're in the sales funnel,
Right. Which is
because
a
it's like
great bit. Yeah.
yeah, because it's just like it feels like the only way for us to do this that doesn't feel backhanded or something.
Yeah.
Um, so it seems like so far that that's just, like going well. But in terms of like format, we need a lot of help with. We're trying to put that content out on Twitter and out on the podcast, and um, that's where we've come to you for really tactical questions about like,
Yeah.
do we put links in Twitter, and do we what should our images look like, and things like that. um, so uh, we very much appreciate having someone who's done it really well. um, I guess like that, I'm interested to hear you talk a little bit about like, so in the spirit of that transparency, we like Daniel and I had a conversation. Um, it was actually the first time we did the actual like talking businessly meeting before recording it. We realized we should
Mm-hmm.
record this. Um, with the thing that I was like really interested in was like, um, you know, Daniel is a really excellent programmer
Mm-hmm.
and can just like put tips out there, can like make packages, can do stuff out there that like basically tells the world like, hey, I'm here, I'm being useful, I'm being helpful, I'm really good at this thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like super powerful. um, I am not at that level of programming. um, and so we had this conversation about, I was like, I walked into Laracon and was like, met all these wonderful people who were very kind to me, and I was like, what is like, I was felt a little bit of like, what is my angle here? Because like
Mm-hmm.
that, all of them are like way better programmers than me, and I have like nothing to offer them there, you know. And so Daniel was like, he's like, honestly, like like you should get good at putting out product content, because that is like one of the things that's not super present in this kind of little ecosystem yet. um, and that's what we've learned, that like with our clients, that having a product angle on what we're kind of selling them is like really powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Partly because we will go to especially smaller clients and we're like, we can help with engineering. Obviously, Daniel is can help with architecture consulting, but we also have a product manager here, and that can help to clarify a lot of what we're doing. So that's been kind of like the hypothesis. Uh, is like Daniel was basically like, had watched like what you did over the last couple of years. It was like, he was like, there's a way to like do this, to like,
Mm-hmm.
like put really helpful stuff out there and become what he calls a pillar of the community.
Mm-hmm.
And in some ways, like that was what we wanted to do with a lot of this content. So I'm interested partly to like get your feedback on the specific content that
Mm-hmm.
we've put out so far, but then also like, can you challenge or like refine that hypothesis at all to say like, well, no, actually people don't need product help, or like you need to reframe this or whatever. Like I'm
Mm-hmm.
very open to like anything you might have there, but that's my long preamble into like, I'd love to hear what you think about what we're doing so far in terms of content.
Yes, lots of thoughts. Um, okay, so I think the first thing is having an angle is great. You gotta have a shtick. You gotta have an angle. You gotta have um, a point of view. And so I think from my perspective, like my shtick, my angles, my point of views are all pretty clear, consistent. Like every single thing that I say online is true, but I don't say every single thing that I think, right? And that's part of like there are times where I am really frustrated with customer service and I just want to go on Twitter and moan about it. And like
Mm-hmm.
that would be true to my personality, but it's like that's not really what I want to put out into the world. And
Mm-hmm.
so I would never say anything that is untrue, but also some things are true that I think, and I'm just like, that's really not worth sharing with people. Honestly, it's not worth
Mm-hmm.
thinking. And so I'm going to stop myself there. So I
Yeah.
think having like um, a point of view, a persona, or something that like people know you for or as is really, really helpful, because then people start to associate you with that thing. And every time you reinforce it, they're like, yeah, that's the guy that knows product, right?
Mm-hmm.
So angle is good. You said when you walked into Laracon, you're like, I don't have anything, to offer these people. I thought that was interesting because um, you're looking at it on one vector, which is like, I don't have anything to offer these people in terms of how to write cleaner code or
Mm-hmm.
whatever. But I think maybe Daniel picked up on this. You're you weren't looking at it on enough vectors where it's like, hey, I know enough about coding to talk to these people. Like,
Yes.
I'm a
Yeah.
developer. I can talk to these people. However, I also know about product.
Mm-hmm.
And I think your read is correct in that most of the people in that room at Laracon and in the Laravel community in general are not product people. They're developers. Um, and so I think you have an opportunity, and this is the best part, honestly, because you're in the world, but you're not of the world. A little Bible reference there. You're in the world, but you're not like you have a foot outside of the world, so where you
Mm-hmm.
can bring in this product and speak developery, but with product content, or speak
Mm-hmm.
product content to developers. And I've found great success in that, with regards to speaking database to developers,
Yeah.
right? So I am a developer, and I'm not the best DBA, the best database admin in the world. I'm not even a DBA at all. So you got one up on me. You're actually a product guy. But I know enough about databases, and I know more about databases than many developers. And so when I walk into a room of developers and talk about databases, everybody thinks I'm a genius. Spoiler alert, I'm
Mm-hmm.
not. Like,
Mm-hmm.
put me in a
Mm-hmm.
different
Mm-hmm.
room and I'm an idiot. I
Yeah.
feel that way at Planet Scale all the time. Everyone at Planet Scale knows 5 times as much about databases as I do. And so I feel like a sixth grader sitting at the, the big kids table. But then I walk over to the developers table and I'm like, hey, I have a sixth grade knowledge of databases. And they're like, oh, you're our king. And I'm
Yeah.
like, this is so
Yeah.
weird, right?
Right.
But
Right.
that's true in all, I feel like that's true in all crossover hits is
Mm.
you know enough about the other world that you can translate it to the world that doesn't really know about it.
Yeah.
And so I think the angle is correct. You also have another angle, which is business owner. And I think you
Mm-hmm.
could play that up somehow. You could bring that in somehow. And so to the actual content, here's my kind of thought and read on that. One thing that I think you have to be really careful of is not um, is not translating. So you can walk into a
Mm.
developer room and speak product and it may go over every single person's head,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you
Mm-hmm.
may come in and talk as if you're talking to a bunch of other product managers
Right.
and using terms and inside baseball references and parlance that like your crew of product people totally gets, super
Yep.
understands it. And you walk into a room full of developers and they're like, oh, this is simply a product guy and I don't
Right.
understand what he's saying.
Right.
And so I think a big risk for you is not translating enough. I think your
Mm.
superpower is going to be taking everything you know and repackaging it for an audience that doesn't know it. And the scary part about that is it looks juvenile to the product people from whence you came,
Right.
but it looks
Right.
advanced to the developers to whom you're speaking, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if a DBA, like if a proper DBA were to take my database course, they would look at me and be like, this guy is talking elementary. Like,
Right. Right.
and that's a little bit scary for me to like be embarrassed and have these people think he's masquerading as a
Yeah.
database guy. But this stuff that he's talking about, we learned in semester one of
Yeah.
databases.
Yeah.
But then the developers are like, man, I never have ever in my life thought about this or learned it or anything. Thank you for such advanced content. And that's
Mm.
that tension between, do I want to look like a smart person or do I want to speak to this audience that I'm
Yeah.
really trying to connect to?
Yeah.
And so that would be, I think that would be my challenge to you is what is a way that you can take maybe 101 level stuff from the
Yeah.
product management world and bring it over to pure developer, pure backend almost, and have us start understanding what you already know. Is any of
Yeah.
that resonating?
It totally does. That sparked like a bunch of thoughts for me. Because yeah, like on the one hand, it's actually the refinement on the angle that I have that I think is really useful is that I'm not just writing product content because like that's been written
Yes.
10,000 times over. And it's not like how do you or even the path of like oh, how does an engineer become a PM, which is a common path. It's like, I'm not writing that either. That's been written a
Correct.
thousand times. What I'm saying is like, hey, developer, you're one thing good developers are good at is like finding a new tool and putting it into their tool belt. They do it all the time. They have to do it a thousand times over the course of their career. So my suggestion is this is one more tool. It's a really good one, actually. It doesn't require a lot of technical knowledge, but it does require like discipline and asking hard
Mm-hmm.
questions. And if you put this tool in your tool belt, it's going to be really stinking useful.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's like kind of the refinement is like I want the audience to really specific. I'm trying to write every post with like a really specific like I'm talking to a developer who has never had a PM
Mm-hmm.
to help them understand this. Um, I think the other thing that's really interesting about it is um, I love the meme of like the
Mm-hmm.
belt graph with like
Midwit. Yeah.
the Jedi on the one side. One thing that it's been I've loved writing these. I'm like I've written like a lot of posts now that are not released and not finished yet, but writing out like essentially like here's everything I know about product for a developer
Mm-hmm.
has really clarified a lot of things in my head. And at the end of almost every post, I arrive at like the Jedi at the end of the thing where I'm like, actually, the simplest, dumbest thing is the way to do it. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm really interested in this idea. So, like, it's interesting that I was thinking about this when you were mentioning, like, oh, if a PM read this, they might think it's like really simplistic. And it's like, I think that's true, but I also think that it's right. That it's like the, there's a lot of ways to over engineer your code. There's a lot of other ways to over engineer product processes to do like this crazy agile stuff to um, when you're doing metrics to measure 100 complex things. And it's like, nah, like
Yeah.
you should know how much
Yes.
money you're making. You should know how much growth is happening. If you launch a new feature, you should know whether or not people are using it. But like, if you measure 100 things, you're going to lose track of that really important stuff. Like, do things in a lightweight way. Don't over engineer it. Don't introduce a bunch of burdensome processes. Like, so it's interesting because like the deeper I go into like, what do I really think about this product topic? I'm like, actually, the simplest, dumbest version that takes an hour is far superior to the like sophisticated one that you need to hire someone for $200,000 a year to go do.
Yes. Yes. And I think even that further refining there is maybe the best angle I've heard yet, which is like it's almost like a product for the rest of us, or 80/20 product, the only parts of product you actually need. And I think what
Mm-hmm.
would be interesting is like um almost framing it without using the word product, because is there a way to say is there a way to teach these concepts without using that word that may potentially have baggage or
Yeah.
meaning or something, but like what do developers want to know? Depends on who they are. If they are, if they're the hacker, builder, maker, want to do my own thing, well, they want to know, how do I build something that people want to buy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And do you, John, have anything to say on how to figure out how to build something that people want to buy?
Boy, do I.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And so like they may would they see like a post about how to do product management and click on it? I don't know. Would they see a
Yeah.
post that's like how to discover, what people want to buy as a back-end developer? It's like, wait, that is me. Like, I would love to sell stuff. I'm a back-end developer.
Yeah.
So I wonder if even putting it in the frame of product management is like,
Yeah.
oh, okay, this is like a big company thing. This
Mm-hmm.
is not something I have to worry about. And maybe
Right.
that's the angle. It's like product management for solos or for small
Yeah.
teams, or product management for people that don't have product managers.
Yeah.
But like taking your big, I view product management, maybe this is a fallacy. I view product management as like, oh, we've got a lot of people, we've got a lot of engineers. We need to start introducing like some guidance and some direction and that sort of thing. maybe that's wrong, but that's my point of view. It'd be interesting
Yeah.
to see if that's other people's point of view. But
Yeah.
taking that and being like, hey, you don't have a lot of engineers. You're under 10 people, you're
Yeah.
under 20 people. You don't need a product manager, but you need to think like one. And
Yeah.
here's how
Yeah.
you do it.
I love that. And I think that's right. It's like the way I always say it is like, if everyone in the company, if all of the individual contributors were really, really good at communication, no one would need product managers. The problem
Mhm.
is that communication, it turns out, is pretty hard.
Mhm.
And so like, especially if you get up to like, hundreds of people, it's like, you're probably going to need some product managers.
Yeah.
If you have less than that, if you have fewer than that, um, you can you can totally not have one. It's completely fine to not have one. The trick is, like, everyone needs to get really serious about communication,
Mm.
and everyone needs to start asking harder questions. And it's not sophisticated, I don't think. Like, it's not. There's a great old Steve Jobs quote where someone was like asking him about like business, like why is business so hard, and he just like scoffs at it. He's like, business isn't hard. Like, it's like everyone can like do business, like understanding the concepts of like profit and like getting stuff in front
Mhm.
of people. Like, he's like, this doesn't take a genius. He's like, it's difficult. Like, it's like the being disciplined and executing is really very difficult, but like, it's not intellectually complex. Like,
Yeah.
everyone could understand what my job is and what I do day to day as a product manager. It's just like, communication is hard, staying disciplined is hard,
Okay, so let's bebop on that for a second. Is there something that you believe? This is always where you have to start. You can't write something. I feel like clickbait is when you're writing something that you don't actually believe just to make people mad, and I am
Yeah.
morally and ethically and strategically opposed to that. But an interesting question is there something that you believe or that you could say that is attention grabbing, like you don't need product management? Like,
Yeah.
is that a headline that you could put your heart behind in terms of the content of the article? And maybe the content of the article is you don't need product management if you're really
Right.
serious about communication and you're very
Yeah.
disciplined and you ask harder questions. Otherwise, product management can serve a pretty good role.
Yeah.
But like framing it, starting with the headline
Yeah.
of you don't need product management is pretty is not incendiary, but it's like it takes a point of view and it takes a stance, and people are going to click on it because they super agree with it or click on it because they super disagree with it.
Yeah. Right.
And then you can flesh out like, hey, I'm backing up the headline. You don't need it if you can do these things.
Right.
But
Right.
if you can't, so you get to offer the nuance that I think is
Yeah.
always important. But the headline is great. And
Yeah.
like, so if you could do something like that, well, maybe that works.
Yeah, I like that because the first one that I wrote originally, the headline, the way that I like framed it up in my head was basically like, it's not that you don't need it, it's that you're already doing it, and if you don't think you're doing it, you're probably doing it badly.
Mm-hmm.
And I wrote like an
Interesting.
article. I wrote one along those lines. It's basically like, if you have a product, you're doing product, you're prioritizing, you have decided on who you're building for, you are uh, deciding which tickets go in front of other tickets. You've like, which means that you're selling to a particular segment. So like, you've made all the product decisions implicitly. But if you haven't made them
Mm.
explicitly, I don't know how like rigorous or good of a job you did making those decisions. Um, and so that's kind of the. But when I first wrote that, Daniel was like, "This sounds pretty negative," and so
Mm-hmm.
I ended up writing something pretty different. But like, that's what I think is the real truth: is that it's not that you don't need it. You might not need a product manager. You might not need
Mm-hmm.
like an expensive person to do it, but like, everyone's doing it. It's just a question of like whether you're doing it with intentionality and discipline, or you're just kind of like winging it.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's an interesting point of view. I guess one fundamental question is who are you trying to reach
Yeah.
with this content?
The angle that I think is the best is like what you talked about, like solos, partners, bootstrapped companies. Basically, all of our clients, their development teams are like
Mm-hmm.
a handful of talented engineers who don't have a product manager.
Okay.
And that I could imagine it's easy for me to imagine that for like a long time, that's most of our clients.
Mm-hmm.
We can do work for, you know, a big company. It's no problem. We can do work for whomever. But like that's where we've seen the most value, I think, is like basically like we come in as this almost like CTO and product manager
Mm-hmm.
pair.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, and so in terms of like from a marketing perspective, that I think is like pretty squarely in our we're also working right now with a solo founder. So that's I think who Thunk works best with. And so that's basically who I when I am writing my like the voice of my blogs is very much I'm thinking about individuals who I know who are in that situation.
Okay, so let me zoom in on that for a second. I refuse to say double click. People have started saying let's double
Yeah.
click on that. I will not say
Yeah.
this. Let me zoom in on that. So that makes sense in terms of like who your ideal customer is. Um, Even in that ideal customer profile, there are two parties, right? There are the three, four, five handful of very talented engineers, and there is the business owner potentially who is guiding or maybe not guiding, but who is like the other side, right? So you have the engineers and you have the business owner. Who are you trying to reach? I feel like Daniel is trying to reach the
Yeah.
engineers from like a bottom up perspective. Who are you trying to talk to?
That's interesting. And that's a very good question because I think I have waffled between those two. And
Mm,
some of my stuff is implicitly or explicitly to the developer and some of it is to an executive at a small company.
okay.
So yeah,
That
that's
would be
interesting.
interesting to think about, I think.
Yeah, pick a lane
Because
or
if you decide that you're going to speak to the engineers, I think one of the benefits there is you have more of a unified voice as Thunk, because you and Daniel are talking to the same people. And so you're kind of growing your audiences together as one audience, but individually on your own Twitter, LinkedIn, whatever. If you decide you're going to speak to the business owner,
mm-hmm,
I feel like that is also very interesting. You'd probably have great success doing that on LinkedIn. Truly, not
mm-hmm,
a bit. Truly, you could actually do that on LinkedIn. Um, your content would have to be a little bit different, right? So
yeah,
you would have to pivot a little bit to talk about not like how does an engineer think about product management, but like how does a non technical or semi technical leader lead a small team of highly talented engineers, like that
mm-hmm,
sort of stuff. And
mm-hmm,
maybe not lead in terms of like, personal development, but lead in terms of decide what they're going to do or work with engineers when you're the one making all the product decisions. Like you had an idea, you business owner had an idea, and now you've got three or four or five engineers. What do you do now? Like
mm-hmm.
your business is working, but suddenly you found yourself managing a software development team and you're not a software
Yeah,
developer. Like,
yeah, yeah.
so
It turns
I
out it's
don't,
kind of hard.
turns out it's very
Yeah.
hard. So I don't know which one, like, I have no idea which one is better.
Yeah.
They are different
It's
though.
a
And I
great
think that's
question though.
something you have to think about.
Yeah.
And, I don't think you have to like, I don't know if you have to decide for sure. Maybe the content you put on LinkedIn is for the bosses, and the content you put
Mm-hmm.
on Twitter is for the developers. But it's at least worth considering if it would be valuable to like hone in on one of
Yeah.
them.
I think that that makes a ton of sense. I think if I were just instinctively to choose, it would be the developer
Hmm.
because I think it's more interesting. Because the thing is, like, the CEO at a bootstrapped company kind of just like is a product manager in some ways,
Hmm.
and so like they should maybe just be reading product management content. Like,
Hmm.
um, so that's interesting. The other thing that you said that really stood out to me because it was like a sort of like dope sort of moment was that so like my greatest strength as a PM was doing customer interviews. I did them
Mm.
like constantly and I had good rapport with like a bunch of customers and would just like I had them just on the phone all the time. And so I just sort of like picked stuff up like a sponge and then would like, someone would ask a question and I'm like, I now have an intuition about what our, what they want and
Mm-hmm.
what the answer to this question is. And um, so I'm a huge proponent of just like go talk to people all the time. And when you said something like 15 minutes ago about like what, like, if you're just like a back end engineer who doesn't confront these kinds of questions often, like what sorts of things do you care about? And I was like, oh duh, I need to go interview a bunch of these people. It's like I have like some intuition about it, which is how I've gotten to the posts that I have, but like
Mm-hmm.
uh I was like, I need to just like sit down for 20 minutes with like 25, 30 different people who I don't
Yep.
know yet and just be
Yep.
like, what do you not know? And like, how do you
Yeah.
prioritize stuff? Why do you prioritize that? And I think I will pick up a bunch of ideas from that.
Yeah. I think that's a great idea. That sounds like an infinite content glitch right
Yeah.
there. So
Yeah.
you can now write forever and ever and
Yeah.
ever.
It's great. I love
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Um,
I think you're well positioned. You're coming into a community that you feel comfortable in and you can speak to, but with sacred knowledge from the other world, you know?
yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's simply a matter of framing and packaging at this point, which you will
Yeah.
find. You'll iterate on, you'll talk to people and you'll find it. But to be so well positioned is enviable. It's like coming into a law firm as an accountant, and like
Right.
lawyers are hysterically bad at spreadsheets. You ask them to open a spreadsheet and they're like, I don't know how. And if you
Yeah.
come in as an accountant who is also an attorney, you're like, you're gonna rule.
Yeah.
And I think you're in kind of a similar position where you're a part of this world, but you have all this sacred knowledge that we don't know anything
It's
about.
fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
If I get enough out there, I'll try to formulate it into a talk or something. And I
Yeah.
think that could be fun too, because there's some like core theses in here that I'm like,
Hmm.
this could be a good 20-minute talk. Um,
Yes. I think for you and for anyone listening, keep an eye out for any pieces of content that is like thing X for audience Y. And so you'll
yeah.
see this pattern a whole lot. So like databases for developers,
Hmm.
or honestly like accounting for attorneys. Like you'll see Excel for people that hate Excel. You'll see
Hmm.
that like headline and that pattern everywhere. You'll see
Hmm.
like JavaScript for backend engineers or learn
Hmm.
React for Ruby devs. And it's that kind of crossover hit that I think is really powerful, because then you immediately hone in on, yes, I am a Ruby developer. Yes, I'm looking to learn React. This is the content for me. I
Yeah.
am self-selecting into this content.
Yeah.
And I think once you start seeing that pattern, you see it everywhere, and then you start to think about, how can I take two things or one thing I know and one group I'm a part of and put that together to be a unique combination that really no one else has?
I love that. Did you reference that in your Laracon talk? I'm trying to remember. Was that
Yeah, I think I referenced that in the Laracon talk about, it's either that or one of the upcoming screencasting videos, basically talking about how like you have a unique viewpoint and you have a
right?
unique set of skills, and there are people who like need your viewpoint and it's going to click for them in a way that everything else hasn't before.
Yeah, I love that. We talked about it a bunch in the Thunk Slack. We were all very inspired by your Laracon
Oh,
talk.
thanks.
And I heard it before I knew you. And yeah, that was a very fun time. Um, the last, I guess, like quick question
Yeah,
is like, I mentioned this as like an idea. So I've been like pretty happy actually with the readership we've had on the blog so far. Like it's like
great.
it's had a good response and like people have been pretty positive. I'm I want to make it like I'm trying to think of ways to make it more accessible. And so one of the ideas we had initially was like, what if I made like a 1 minute Redux version as a video in Twitter? Um,
Mm-hmm.
and the first one that we put out, like it was not that great, but like it was interesting because it actually did worse than my other posts.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, so if you have any thoughts on how to do that better, that's interesting. But then also the other question I had was like, I had this idea, and I can't tell if it's a stupid idea or not, which is like I like listening more than I like reading.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought of like, what if there was a podcast feed with like 3-minute episodes, and it's literally just I read the blog post, and
Love it.
it's like that's it. That's the whole
Love it.
podcast.
Love it. I think that's a fantastic idea. I'm always super on board for taking stuff you've already done and trying to get more mileage out of it. So the hard part's done, right? You wrote the thing. Writing the thing is the hard part. Reading it out loud takes as long as it takes to read out
Sure.
loud. Um, yeah, I think, let's see. I think short, sweet stuff like that could potentially do very well. I think if you're going to do that, packaging it in a way that's like what do you, I guess y'all call it the Thunk blog, right? That's not going to work for a podcast.
Yeah. No, that's probably
Even
an opportunity to brand it as whatever product for developers. Yeah.
exactly like and I would say something like bites or quick hits or
Hmm.
shorts or something like that, just to say like, hey, this is a very short, semi-weekly, bi-weekly, whatever those words mean.
Hmm.
Occasional, podcast about whatever product for developers or product for the rest of us, something like that. Um, yeah, I think that could absolutely work. And
Cool.
in terms of like the video on Twitter, I could see, I was the one that said you should do as much video as you can, and I still stand by that. But I could see there's not a lot to look at in these
Right.
videos, right? And so talking head only, I could see being like people watch it and then are like, oh, this is just a talking head. I'm gonna stop, and I could see that being like negative signs.
Yeah.
Um, so perhaps quick hit audio is the best thing for you, and it's
Yeah.
definitely worth a try, especially if the cost in terms of like your personal
Yeah.
investment is so low.
Yeah. Yeah. It'd be very easy to pump out, uh, pay someone $100 for cool art, and then
Hmm.
put it out. Yeah, I think that sounds great. Yeah, it was funny. Like we were chatting about it. Daniel was like, "Oh man, I'm so bummed the video idea didn't work," and I had this like funny, weird confidence that I don't always have about stuff I'm working on. Where I was like, "It's fine." Like I am so confident that this content is useful and
Yes.
valuable that like if this one was a swing and a miss, like I don't care. Like this will
Yep.
find somebody sometime. I'm so confident that it's like good advice.
Yep. And I think that gives you a lot of freedom and a lot of like personal empowerment to try different frames,
Yeah.
right? So at some point you're going to find a frame for the content that everyone finally like latches onto, and you just got to iterate until you do. And I have tried so many different like styles of video and threads and links in the top and links in the bottom, and you just keep going, and eventually you'll find it. And the thing I'm on right now, which is very interesting, is like when making YouTube videos, you know how there's like real psychology and then there's pop psychology, there's like Malcolm
Yeah.
Gladwell and all the fun stuff.
Yeah.
I look at like creating courses as real education. Like we're going to sit and we're going to talk and we're going to talk about
Mm,
nuance and depth. And then I look at YouTube as pop education. It's like,
mm,
hey, this is going to be fun. We're going to skate over the surface of a bunch of stuff. We're going to leave a bunch of stuff unsaid. But the point here is like, you know, 50% entertainment, 50% education. And that's a
yeah.
different frame for knowledge that I'm used to, because I'm used to, let's sit down and talk for 3 hours about this course. And now it's
Hmm.
like, you've got 12 minutes and it better be fun or
Yeah.
people aren't going to click.
Yeah.
And so just iterating until you find the right frame, I think is a fun process. And then once you do, it's even better because now you're just running the system.
Yeah. I love that. And that's how you make something that is clickable enough to get onto the Primogen
Exactly.
feed.
Yeah. Yeah,
That was
exactly.
awesome.
Like, make it, saying PHP doesn't suck anymore, like that riles up a lot of people. Like
Sure.
people were mad that I suggested it ever sucked. People were
I love
mad
it.
that I suggested that it doesn't suck anymore. Meanwhile, I'm just like, hey, I'm going to show you all the cool things that have changed. But yeah,
Yeah.
finding that right like frame to draw people in to actually get them to consume the thing is
Yeah.
no
It's
easy
great.
task.
Did you fully appreciate as you wrote that video what a like mic drop it would be to tell everyone that they don't have very many users?
Yeah, I actually that was one of the things that came out in post much better than I imagined it in my head because
That's
I was
funny.
recording that and I said it and then I made the little face with the eyebrow
Yeah,
raise and then
yeah,
I watched it back later and I was like, "Oh, dang, that's really funny. That was
that's
that
great.
was really good."
Yeah,
Um
exactly.
so I
That's
was
very funny.
really happy with how that turned out. I thought that was super
Yeah,
funny.
that's cool. Man, that's really fun. Yeah, it was great to see you get a shout out on there because I love his channel too, and
Yeah.
it was great to see worlds colliding there.
Yeah. He's another one who's mastered whatever his, frame is because he
Yeah.
is potentially the smartest developer that like I've been close like in
Hmm.
proximity to, but his frame is not like neck beard, let's talk for one
Right.
hour about the internals. His frame is very pop education, but sometimes it shows through like how much of a genius he is, which makes it a really interesting angle.
Yeah.
Right. So
Totally.
even in like the PHP video, he's comparing it to these 10 other languages that I've never touched in my freaking
Right.
life. And
Right.
so, yeah, that's another one that's mastered. And some people hate it, by the way, the frame that he
Mhm.
puts on his content, but
Yeah. Well,
he's mastered it for his audience.
it's so great because like I again like I'm not a genius and I have not been programming for 10 years and like I find his stuff very approachable. Sometimes he's talking about things that I'm like I need to search these terms a little bit, but
Same.
like
Yeah.
for the most part I'm like I hear what he's saying. He seems very like open-minded and reasonable. So it's in my experience really smart people can speak in terms that everyone gets. Like people who like
Yes.
this I don't know like uh this actually comes back a little bit to like the Jedi bell curve is just
Hmm.
like uh I've met some like in like the first co-founder at this like the first startup that I worked with was like this like top of his class PhD computer science guy from Stanford, and he was just like the gentlest like
Hmm.
like I was like sorry I don't quite understand this like thing about parallelization, and he just like sit down really like and not condescending at all, break it down for me in terms that I'd understand. And I was like,
Yeah.
people who obfuscate, people who you intentionally like alienate, I feel like it's like that's a defense mechanism for being like pretty smart, but like the really smart people can kind of break right through that. It's amazing.
Yeah. I think a slight disagreement there is there are really, really smart people who can do that.
Yeah, true.
And there are really, really smart people who can't do that.
That's true.
And one like I'm still trying to formulate it into a pithy saying is like the there are sets of rules in the world that you really just you should either live by and like understand what the rules are and exploit them to your own benefit, or you can rage against the machine and just be mad at the rules all the time. And
Mm,
so what I think happens is some really, really smart people like look at, let's say, the primogen or somebody who doesn't understand, and they just rage and say everyone should understand this, you're stupid if you don't understand this. And then there are some really, really smart people that look at the rules, and the rules are like, not everyone understands everything that you do. That is the system that you're living
mhm,
in. And some of those smart people say, okay, I recognize that that system is true, I wish it were different. However, because that is true,
mm,
I am going to use persuasion and
mm.
teaching to make, like, to operate within that rule set, but still get the outcome that I want. And some people rage against the machine and they're like, this shouldn't be this way. And you're like, I'm sorry, man, it is this way.
Yeah,
Well, like, what do
right.
you want me to do?
Yeah.
And so I feel like there are some smart people that only ever are frustrated with reality. And there are some smart people that are smart enough to step outside and observe reality as it is and say, okay, because that is reality, what do I do in response to that?
Mm,
So
yeah. Yeah.
something I'm trying to formulate and turn into an article. But I think
That's interesting.
there are rules that exist that you can explore and exploit to your own benefit, or you can just be frustrated all the time that the
Yeah.
rules exist.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really interesting. I think the other funny thing that I have to catch myself on that with is like I'm like setting this standard for like, well, if you're really really smart, you can explain things in terms that I can understand, like framing it all in terms of what I can understand. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
well, yeah, if there was a super genius and he said something that I didn't understand, I'd be like, well, therefore he must not be a super genius. It's like,
Yeah,
well, that's
somehow
pretty
it
short
always
sighted.
comes back to me looking very good. I do love, yeah.
Yeah, I smell a little bit of bullshit there. I'm gonna keep on searching internally for that
Yeah,
one.
that's a good one.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks so much, Aaron. I know
Yeah.
we're at time, but this is awesome, and I'm sure we'll have you again at some point when Daniel's here.
All right. I love to be impaneled. Thanks for having me.
Of course, and keep on reaching out with feedback.
I will. See ya.
Cool. Talk soon. Do we just have to wait until the music runs out? This is what happened last time. I thought the show was over and I kept on talking. And then, okay, that's it.